Hello and welcome. Fear that Israel's war on Gaza will continue for some time to come has led to urgent cries for humanitarian support. 12 days of intense military campaign has led to a rapidly rising death toll, approaching nearly 700 on the Palestinian side, including many women and children. In the most densely populated strip of land on earth, hemmed in by an extensive Israeli blockade, there are few options for the 1.5 million residents of Gaza. My guests today have fought for an end to the humanitarian crisis for months before the latest Israeli campaign began. They are British Member of Parliament Clare, who visited Gaza aboard the SS Dignity in November. She was Secretary of State for International Development in the cabinet of Prime Minister Tony Blair until she resigned in protest over the Iraq War. Ms. Short joins us from London. And in Atlanta, Georgia in the US, we have Cynthia McKinney, who was aboard the Dignity when it was rammed by the Israeli Navy on the 30th of December, causing it to be diverted to Lebanon. Ms. McKinney is a former congresswoman and former presidential candidate here in the US, representing the Green Party. Now, they both had independently participated in efforts by an international group of peace activists to symbolically break the siege on Gaza last year. That siege was imposed by Israel and the international community after Hamas took control of the Gaza Strip more than a year and a half ago. The activists arranged for a ship named the Dignity to ferry medical supplies and observers from Cyprus to Gaza. And that effort was derailed last month when the Israeli Navy intercepted the Dignity. So today we ask, what are the effects of the long-term siege on the Gaza Strip and how effective are the efforts to break the blockade? Remember, you can join our conversation with your questions and comments. Log on to livestation.com/AJE. You can enter the chat room and take part. We also welcome your phone calls on the show. I want to welcome in both Clare Short and Cynthia McKinney. Good to have you both on the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting us.
Pleasure. Clare Short, ma'am, if I could start with you. Are you surprised when Israel denies that there's a humanitarian crisis taking place in Gaza and that some in Israel say it's essentially staged by Hamas?
Well, I'm sort of not surprised because the truth is the spokespeople for the Israeli position just constantly reiterate complete untruths about not targeting civilians, about the state of life in Gaza, and they get away with it because Western governments don't challenge them.
What did you see during your time in Gaza? You were there, of course, even before the current campaign began, Ms. Short.
Well, it was early November. The ceasefire had held for nearly 6 months, 5 months, until Israel broke it. But still, the two crossings, Rafah with Egypt and then the other with Israel, were constantly closed. People were short of food, the schools were short of paper for books, there were no spare parts for the sewage system, so raw sewage was going into the sea, the place smelt. I think nearly half of all children were anemic because of poor nutrition. The place is incredibly densely occupied. We also went down to the Rafah crossing and saw the tunnels, and the tunnels, everyone talks as though they're only for arms. The tunnels were the only way people were getting some pharmaceuticals in. I saw olive oil that had been brought through, basic food supplies. It made things very expensive, but the tunnels were the only way of getting food in for people and the basic things they needed. But scarcity was everywhere. Okay. But it was very moving because people still turn their children out smartly for school. I don't know how the women managed to get the washing done, and people still were living with enormous dignity in this terrible mess and this very overcrowded place.
Well, Cynthia McKinney, you were on the following mission on board the Dignity when actually the Israeli Navy rammed it, causing it to be diverted. Take me through what happened.
Well, basically, you know, we all convened in Larnaca, Cyprus, and there we had a press conference, and, you know, all of the international press were there, so it was not like it was a secret that the Dignity was about to set sail. And it was also not a secret that the Dignity had 3 tons of medical supplies, as well as 3 doctors, 3 reporters from Al Jazeera, and I have to say thank you so much to Al Jazeera, and the 1 reporter from CNN, Carl Penho, and the country of Lebanon, who basically saved our lives. But we set sail, and as it was very, very dark, we began to see spotlights shining on the Dignity. And ships would appear from out of nowhere, and then they would disappear, and then they would reappear, and all the time there were the spotlights shining on the Dignity. And then all of a sudden there was pitch darkness, and everything went everywhere, and people went everywhere, and the Dignity was hit 3 times, twice in the front, once on the side. The side is where I was sitting, and one of the doctors on the boat said to me, "Prepare to die." And so that's what I did. I mentally prepared myself for death. And then the Israelis started playing with us over the telephone, and they called and said, "Turn around and go back to Larnaca." Of course, afterwards they said they didn't know who we were, but they knew that we had set sail from Larnaca. Right. They said that we were trying to outmaneuver their warship. We're on a pleasure boat, and
well, you know what? Actually, I'm going to do.
They said that we damaged their ship, and of course, you can see that the Dignity was nearly totaled. So we're sitting out there in the middle of the sea with a boat that's taking on water, and we're short of fuel, and we don't know where to go. And thank goodness when the message came through to us that Lebanon would rescue us. And we saw the ship with the Lebanese flag, and we just, we were so thankful, and we were so grateful.
Ms.
And
McKinney?
then, of course, I think everyone saw the warm welcome from the Lebanese people.
I'm going to bring on, actually, on the phone from Larnaca in Cyprus, Huwaida Araf, who's actually one of the organizers of the Free Gaza movement that organizes the Dignity trips and missions. Huwaida Araf, good to have you with us. Let me ask you where things stand for you with these efforts to try to get into Gaza now that the Dignity is pretty much out of commission.
It's true. The Dignity is out of commission for a while. We're so thankful that everyone on board came out uninjured. We are currently working on procuring another ship. We are not going to let the violence of the Israeli military deter us, because what we see is that the Israelis are using illegal force against a civilian population in Gaza. You mentioned the rising death toll. Palestinians are being slaughtered, and we don't think that the community of states has done enough, that they have fulfilled their obligations under international law, specifically the Fourth Geneva Conventions, to protect the civilian population of Palestine. And so we need more action. We have a representative in Rafah. Doctors are still not being let in through Rafah. Israel is not letting doctors or journalists in through any of the other crossings. So we really have a humanitarian crisis there, and we cannot sit by. And so we are going to insist that we're going to be let in. And so we're working on... I
just want to ask, if you secure another ship and you get down to the same effort that you had on the last few trips with the Dignity, the risk there, I presume, is still there that you would be at the mercy of Israeli warships?
Well, Israel did claim that they made a lot of claims. One, that we hit them. Two, that they tried to communicate with our boat and we didn't answer. They didn't know who we were. It was a mistake, etc. We have announced yesterday. We issued a clear announcement that we are going again, and in the next few days we will announce the date, the time, our exact route. And Israel cannot say that they didn't know that we were coming. And it's not true that they didn't know, because we always announce this, and a copy of our announcement, usually to the press, goes to the Israeli Foreign Ministry, the Israeli Navy, and the Israeli Ministry of Defense, because Israel is still the occupying force in Gaza. They still control Gaza's waters. They completely occupy the Gaza Strip and are committing violations of their obligations as an occupying power. But because they do control these waters and have used force against the Palestinians, for example, the fishermen trying to fish in their own waters, we do announce very clearly that we're coming, and the Israelis have communicated with us before, so they do know what our ship is. So it's not true, but just to be clear that they know, we announced yesterday that we're coming, and they will know exactly date and time of our departure, so they can't say that it's a mistake. We will have on board doctors, journalists, and tons of medical supplies.
Well, I wish you your future missions safety, and thank you very much for joining us there on the line from Larnaca.
Thank you for having me.
As I get back to my guest, let's get on the phone from Washington State here in the U.S. Jim with a question. Jim, what would you like to ask?
I'd like to have your station do a little more unbiased reporting? For example, we keep hearing about the tunnels between Egypt and Gaza Strip. Why don't you take photos, if possible, of what is actually being transported through the tunnels, so we know for sure there are medical supplies and food being brought through there, and not arms. I feel that there are a lot of arms and whatnot being brought through there.
Now, Clare
Another
Short,
thing is that
Jim, let me put that to Clare Short then. Clare Short, I mean, that obviously is a claim that's made by Israel, and it would seem that it's probably the only route by which any weapons that reach Hamas could be through those tunnels. Again, that's an issue that does endanger the population if rockets and missiles are being brought through.
Well, I assume some weaponry comes through, but mostly it's food and pharmaceuticals and basic things that people need. But I mean, Israel is armed to the teeth. It's the great military power in the world. It's a nuclear power. In fact, in international law, people who are occupied are allowed to resist occupation. I wouldn't recommend it because these rockets are very weak and they can't be targeted. And of course, we've seen a total imbalance. What is it? Over the last 7 years of the rockets, I think 12 Israelis or 13 have lost their lives, and it's something like 4,000 Palestinians, most of them in Gaza. So all this talk as though Hamas are the monsters. Hamas won an election. They're the only government in the Middle East that were properly elected, and they've got a few paltry weapons, and Israel is a mighty armed power.
Although I wonder,
Such
Ms. Short,
an imbalance
I wonder,
in
Ms.
the
Short,
description of this problem.
I wonder if to some degree, though, there might be some rationality in the argument that Hamas, by continuing to fire rockets, still does endanger the population in Gaza because of the density of it.
I would just like to say that
there was a ceasefire. There was a ceasefire negotiated with the help of the Egyptian government, which held completely for 5 months. And then at the beginning of November, Israel said that some people from Gaza were trying to dig a tunnel into Israel and went in and bombed and killed people and broke the ceasefire. And of course, broke the terms of the ceasefire by tightening the siege. I mean, it was already a shortage of food and so on when we were there, but after that they stopped all fuel supplies, the place went into darkness. People were in a desperate condition.
Okay.
Israel broke the ceasefire.
All right,
Hamas stood by the ceasefire.
Cynthia McKinney, I'm going to ask you to just hold fire for just a second because we're going to take a short break, but I'll get straight back to your point as soon as we return. Now, as we take that break, let me remind you, you can join the conversation with your questions and comments by joining the livestation.com chat room, and you can see the debate taking place there right now. But we're going to be right back with more.